Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and Coffee and Cartridges. Today let's just drink some coffee and discuss rifle cartridges. Stay tuned. I want to start out today by asking you guys a question. What is the most important or primary focus that you pick when it comes to a bullet or a rifle cartridge? Is it, and this is about hunting, is it the muzzle velocity? Is it the ballistic coefficient? Is it the construction of the bullet? That's the right answer probably. But what are you looking for? Everyone looks at this differently, and it's just kind of interesting to get your guys' take on it. So leave a comment below. Generally speaking, if you're shooting relatively close, let's say 200 yards or closer, something like a ballistics coefficient really is not vital at all. It's not really anything to be concerned with. Now, if you are hunting around 500 yards, maybe 600 yards, it will definitely come into play. It's definitely going to show up with the retained energy and velocity. And I'm not going to even talk about hunting past that because I just don't think it's something we should be doing. But going back to kind of close up, you know, a couple hundred yards. Velocity is king, I would say, when it comes to the close to moderate ranges. If you have high velocity, several good things are going to happen. Your trajectory is going to be flatter, possibly easier to hit game. Your maximum point blank range is going to be extended. At higher velocities, a lot of your bullets are going to expand and work properly. Like a copper or an alloy monolithic bullet is going to expand at high speeds, and it might not at lower speeds. And in fact, whether it's a bonded bullet or even a cup and core bullet, generally it's going to perform its best at high velocities. Now at super close range, extreme high velocities, you could have problems. In my opinion, generally speaking, up close, the faster you can get that bullet to go, the better off you are. Get past 300 yards, 300 to 500, 600 yards, that would be where a high ballistic coefficient bullet would have some effect. Now, for long-range target shooting, as you get closer to that 1,000 yards and beyond, the ballistic coefficient has a much greater effect. But we're talking about hunting here. I've watched YouTubers who have a lot more experience than me when it comes to rifles and gunsmithing and all kinds of cool stuff. And I heard one of them literally say that ballistic coefficient meant nothing. It meant nothing. It was irrelevant. That's not true. That's denying physics and science. It definitely has an impact. It definitely does something. The question is just, for your hunting application, and specifically the hunting distance you're going for, the effect, the scientific effect, could be so minuscule that it is irrelevant. So if one were to say, well, I hunt mainly woods and the furthest shot I've ever taken was just a little over 100 yards and I could care less about BC, that makes complete sense. You really shouldn't care about BC. At those distances, you might not even care if the bullet is a spire point, Spitzer, or it could be a round nose. At those distances, something like a lever action 30-30, 45-70 could work just fine. You might say, well, I occasionally shoot 150, 200 yards. I would say there is an advantage with a spire point or, Spitzer shaped bullet. And I wouldn't really recommend a flat nose or a round nose. But at those ranges, the high BC bullets, once again, doesn't really matter. To say it means nothing or has no impact is not legit. Of course it does. But it's so minor, it might as well be worthless. Now, to those guys who routinely shoot 400 or 500 yards out west in the Rockies and in the prairies of Wyoming, Alaska, wherever, That's generally the shot provided to them, and after many generations, they're used to making shots like that ethically. If you were to hear someone say ballistic coefficient means nothing, they would laugh at you and say, what are you talking about? Of course it does. In fact, they might be more concerned with the ballistic coefficient of a bullet than the speed, than the muzzle velocity. More than likely, they do care about muzzle velocity, but everyone just is going to look at this differently, and everyone just has a different opinion on it. And as long as you don't say something dumb like, it means nothing, what the ballistic coefficient is means nothing, what the muzzle velocity is means nothing, the shape of the bullet means nothing. If you say something stupid like that, then of course you're talking from ignorance. You need to do a little bit more research. It all means something. It all has an effect. A round-nosed bullet and a high-efficient, high BC, heavy per caliber bullet are not the same thing. And one is definitely going to retain its energy, its velocity. It's going to buck the wind better. It's better for long range. And then, of course, you know, there are bullets for certain applications. If you get a VMAX bullet and shoot a deer with it, it's probably not, well, not probably, I'd say it's not the ideal bullet. It's made to be extremely frangible. It's a cup and core, but on the extreme side. As soon as it penetrates, it's going to blow up. If it even penetrates, it might blow up on the outside because it's not used to that thick of skin. You're shooting at 600 yards with a monolithic bullet at slow speeds, just going to put a pinhole through the animal more than likely. Depending, I mean, there's the LRX, which, you know, will expand a little bit easier. You know, you're shooting a Berger VLD at 20 yards, going 3,400 feet per second. You better hit the exact spot you want to hit, and even then, it's not the ideal situation for that bullet. So bullet construction and its terminal ballistics is the most important thing. And then understanding at what range and at what speed is the ideal for that bullet, it would be the next important thing as far as I'm concerned. But I want to talk about the BC versus the muzzle velocity. It's not that they need to be in contrast with each other. They can work in tandem. But there's definitely people in a group that's just all about muzzle velocity. There's people in a group that's all about BC, and I just kind of in the middle, I'm saying both things can be equally important, and both things are relevant. So I've been shooting my 270 short mag. I've been shooting two loads, 145 grain ELDX and a 130 grain CX. And I'm going to show you some stuff here in a minute and kind of explain how the BC at longer ranges will affect these two, but also show if you get a high enough muzzle velocity, it's going to take a long time and many hundreds of yards to ever see much of an impact with the BC. So let's look at that now. Just a little comparison here. 130 grain CX bullet going at 32.53 and 145 grain ELDX bullet going at 30.88. These are real world velocities that I just got yesterday from some hand loads. So this just had to kind of show you the difference between muzzle velocity and ballistic coefficient. This 130 grain bullet will have about I think it's a 403 on the ballistic coefficient. And the 145 grain ELDX is around a 536. So at 100 yards, the 130 has 30.30 on the feet per second, and the 145 has 29.14 on the feet per second. You can see the energy there, about an 80 foot-pounds energy advantage for the 145 ELDX, and that's just basically because it is a heavier bullet. 300 yards, they're actually really close on the feet per second. They've pretty much become tied. And actually, the ELDX has a little bit higher feet per second. It's kind of caught up to that other bullet. How's that possible? Because of the ballistic coefficient. You look at the energy, that 80 feet per second energy has expanded by quite a bit. The drop, now the CX is going to be a little flatter because of that muzzle velocity. So pretty darn similar, 8 versus 8.8 inches on the drop. The drift is pretty much the same. There is a slight 0.2 inch advantage on the ELDX over the CX. That means nothing.
Let's look out here to 600 yards. So the feet per second has totally flipped, and now the ELDX is going quite a bit faster than the CX. The energy has expanded even more in favor of the ELDX. The drops, about, the CX still has an advantage on the drop. It's still a little flatter. And then the wind drift is, you're talking 2.5 inches, a little over 2 inches at 600 yards. So basically, it's a non-factor. I can tell you very confidently that I can get these going probably 3,300 feet per second, because I shot it with no signs of pressure whatsoever. So I'm very confident that I could get 3,300 feet per second out of that. That's going to make this a little bit closer. So that would mean that the CX is going to have an even bigger advantage at the beginning and, of course, at 100 yards. And that would mean that the energy is basically going to be even at 100 yards. That's because with that extra velocity gives the CX even more energy. So even though one is heavier, one has more velocity, and the energy basically equals out at 100. At 300, you still are going to have the same scenario that happened up here play out again, but it'll be closer. So your 130 grain CX does still have an advantage on feet per second, but not by a whole lot, by about 40. The energy is still going to be won by the ELDX. However, it's closer. And then really the drop and the drift, there's just nothing to say about it. It's a non-factor pretty much. At 600 yards, the 130 is slower now. It has lost enough velocity. The 145, because of its ballistic coefficient, did basically pass it and is now going faster. But look how much closer it is. It's just a little over 100 feet per second. Energy, basically the same story as before. It's just a little closer. Definite advantage for the 145. And then once again, you're talking like 4 to 5 inch drop advantage with the CXs because it's just faster and flatter coming out of the gate. And then once again, about a 2 inch drift. It's a non-factor. So comparing that first, the 130 is going at 32.53 and the 145 is going at 30.88. This is kind of interesting. At the muzzle, you had 165 feet per second advantage for the CX. At 100, it dropped to 116. At 300, it literally switched over to a velocity advantage for the ELDX of 7. And then at 600, 150 grain velocity advantage for the ELDX. Energy at 100, the ELDX had an 84. At 300, it had a 232. And at 600, it had a 328. So basically, because of ballistic coefficient, slowly the ELDX caught it on velocity and always had more energy and just continued to expand on that. Probably a better comparison, though, is those 130s going at 3,300. So at 100, you've got 159 feet per second advantage for the CX. That does drop to only 45 at 300. And then at 600, the LDX does eventually catch up and take over, and it has 117 feet per second advantage. Energy, similar, just not quite as dramatic. Only 10 foot-pounds more energy at 100, 154 foot-pounds more, and then 291 foot-pounds more at 600. Moral of this story is very, very clear. Ballistic coefficient is all about longer ranges. So from like 3 to 600 yards, it should be a pretty clear advantage on retaining your energy and velocity. And it's definitely going to help. From 0 to 300 yards, there's not enough to worry about. And in fact, that little bit faster feet per second you have on the get-go, especially here, I would pick it. You definitely have an advantage. There's not really an energy advantage at all until you get 3 to 600 yards. So, between 0 and 300 yards, muzzle velocity seems to be a better metric to go by. But then from like 3 to 600 yards, ballistic coefficient really definitely has a point and definitely has a reason for existing. So this is another reason why I don't just want one bullet out of my 270 short mag. I want two. I want a very fast, copper type monolithic bullet for that closer shot. And then I would like kind of a cup and core VLD style bullet for that 300 to 600 yard shot. I don't think these are really in contrast with each other. I think they complement each other.
So that kind of shows you that it all has its place. It all means something. And from 1 to 300 yards, is there really a need to have high BC? Not really. And I would give the edge to that CX bullet for sure. From 300 to 600 yards, I think there's a definite advantage. As you notice, the wind drift, bucking the wind drift really didn't have much of an effect at all. And the CX was a little bit flatter shooting. But definitely the high BC bullet retained its energy and its velocity, and it's going to be going faster, even though it started out slower, and have quite a bit more energy at those longer ranges. It really just comes down to, at that point, the bullet construction. Maybe you say, well, yeah, it's got more energy and velocity, but I don't like the cup and core soft bullets like that for hunting, and I want a monolithic or I want a bonded bullet, and I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you also might say, I want to make sure it expands at those little bit longer distances. I want to make sure I kill the animal ethically. You know, if it does splinter up into a few pieces and ruin a little bit extra meat, I'm okay with that. And so that's not wrong either. We generally get into camps when it comes to bullets, rifles, rifle cartridges, and we find something that works for us, and then we become kind of a fanboy of that, and I'm guilty myself. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just natural human nature. We become a fanboy of that bullet or that rifle, whatever the case, and which makes us want to, defend it anytime it's ever brought up, which makes us inherently kind of become a debater and try to put everything else down. When in reality, there's good in everything. There's good in every cartridge, in every bullet. Just as long as you understand its function, its application, it all has a place. And the truth of the matter is, every gun is different, okay? And in all honesty, every shooter is different. We see things slightly different. We shoot slightly different, but definitely the guns are different. I've heard a person say, well, I've been using partitions since whatever year, and I've killed this many of this animal, this many of this animal, and they work great. And 100%, absolutely. And then another person says, well, I've shot those partitions and they're just not as accurate as I would like them to be, and I've shot maybe some newer bullet that seems to be more accurate. And then the person who likes the partition says, no, I've never had any accuracy issues out of the partition. It's been perfect. And that could be, because that person's gun in that particular load might be very accurate with that partition. And someone else's gun might not like the partition and just might have liked a newer bullet. So that's the thing when we sometimes get into debates arguing about our favorite bullet caliber rifle, we forget we're not all starting at the same platform. You could be shooting a gun at a very high altitude in the Rocky Mountains at 500 or 600 yards, and that particular gun likes a particular bullet, and I could be shooting at a much lower elevation with much shorter distances, and my gun just likes a totally different bullet. So none of us are starting at the same place. Even the same rifle can be different. Every gun shoots differently. So I think before we call each other liars, like you say it's accurate, I'm saying it's not accurate, well, maybe yours is accurate in your gun and mine's not. So just think about that. There's a good chance everybody, what they're stating, is correct for them in their gun, in their experience. And so just keep that in mind. Every gun is different. And every hunting application is different. Here in Missouri, shooting in the woods with a 100-yard shot, I might find a particular cartridge and bullet that works for me. But then I can't push that on everybody else, especially someone living in a totally different part of the world, hunting a totally different animal. So because I'm a fan of a particular cartridge, rifle, or bullet, doesn't mean it's going to work for somebody else. 99.9% of the people who comment on my videos are excellent and add value to the comment section, and I'm really glad that they do. You get an occasional troll, and it's hard to tell if they're serious or if they're not serious, but they're all about, you know, like the 7 PRC. Had a guy not too long ago. He just, I think he deleted most of his comments, but I mean, he just came in absolutely ready to fight everybody in the comments, fight me, insult me, call me all kinds of names, because I did the video 7mm PRC in 1 minute, in which I didn't even run down the 7mm PRC. I just said, if you have a 7 Rem mag, should you sell it and go buy a 7 PRC? And my answer is no. I don't think you should. You can if you want, obviously, but I guess because I said that, it made him mad, and he went off and just went on and on and on. I ended up having to block him because he just wouldn't stop. He started to insult other people that had basically agreed with me a little bit. He started to insult them, and I was like, you gotta stop. I asked him to be civil, and then he just went off. So, I don't know, it's so silly to me. It's a rifle cartridge. You know, I'm obviously passionate about it. I'd love to talk about it. That's what I do on this channel, but I'm not gonna be offended if someone disagrees with me. And had he even stepped back and looked at more of my videos, I've had several videos where I was very positive toward the 7mm PRC. I think it's a great design cartridge. But I don't know, people can really get upset about, I mean, it's just like, and at first I thought he was trolling, kind of being tongue-in-cheek, but the longer it went on, I realized this guy thinks he's found gold, and he's so mad that everybody else can't see that this is, in his words, the ultimate cartridge of all time. So, I don't know. I will digress. One more little topic today before I turn it off. And I was just thinking about the difference between like what rifle cartridges hunters like versus what rifle cartridges, you know, like competitive shooters like. Obviously, the hunters are going to want the higher velocities. You know, they're not concerned about efficiency. They want more powder, more, you know, velocity, more energy, basically killing power. And then the competitive shooters, you know, whether it's F-class, bench rest, PRS, whatever, they're looking really for accuracy, number one, and then just for consistency and ease of shooting at long range. So they don't want the highest, most powerful round. It's harder to stay on target, see their shot. You know, if it's just a wallop every time they shoot, they can't stay on target. They can't see the bullet trace. And so it's just much more difficult. So they definitely go with a different style of cartridge. It's pretty cool when you start to see the consensus. So in the hunting world, for instance, you know, there's a consensus that certain cartridges are great for hunting. This is backed up by many people attempting it, testing it, sharing their experience, and realizing it does great. A 7 Rem mag, a 270 Winchester, a 30-06, a 308. Cartridges like that just work and have worked for a long time. A 300 Win mag, a 300 Weatherby mag, a 375 H&H. These cartridges just are tried and tested and proven, and everybody knows there's a consensus that these are great hunting cartridges. It's really interesting to look at the cartridges that most of these competitive shooters pick, because they all generally pick the same ones. 6 PPC, 6 BR, bench rest, 6 Dasher, 6 GT. A lot of those 6s, even the 6 Creedmoor, a lot of those 6mm have become very, very popular for long-range competitive shooting, especially in bench rest. And then with like F-class, especially the 1,000-yard F-class, or the 1,000-yard competition, whatever it might be, basically the same cartridges, but with just a little bit more fuel to, you know, buck that wind just a little bit better. So things like a 284, a 6.5 284, a 284. Now they have a 284 Shehane and a 284 Wheeler. You know, and then you've got people that like the 300 WSM, but most people generally are in that 7mm to 6mm or 6.5. And if you look at the profile of all the cartridges for competitive shooting, they're all basically short, fat cases and with a heavy bullet because it's high BC. It's going to buck the wind a little better. And their speed is not the biggest concern. It's more about accuracy, consistency, and an aerodynamic bullet to get the best exterior ballistics. And then in the hunting, it's, you know, it's more about velocity. Maybe you got to get the smaller bullet to get that velocity. It's about velocity, trajectory, so on and so forth. Lots of knockdown power, energy at certain ranges. And the more I've thought about this, the more I've realized there's one cartridge that is like a big overlap, and it's the 284 Winchester. Now we know that the 284 Winchester has not been successful in the commercial rifle world. It just wasn't. It was brought out in the 100 and the 88. It was made to cram into a short action. It was made to basically duplicate the 280, which it did. But because they never put it in the Model 70, say in a medium or longer action, its potential was never really realized. It never did commercially good at all, and it kind of failed. And then the story goes, the 6.5 284 became very popular in like the 90s for F class. In fact, had the world record. And then today, a lot of those same people have moved on from the 6.5 284 and went back to the 284. And it and its Wildcat brethren, the Shehane and the Wheeler and all that, that's pretty much the most popular 1,000-yard F-class cartridge. But like people that I've known, like my uncle who has a 284 and has used it for hunting for a long time, it's a phenomenal hunting cartridge. It's right there with the 280 actually improved. It's not far on velocity, say to the 7 PRC or the 7 Rim Mag. It's not quite there, but it's close. It's a notorious overperformer. It'll always do better than what the books say. One of the reasons is the books are assuming you have a Model 100 semi-auto or a Model 88 lever, and you're going to go with the 1 in 10 twist with the lighter bullets. It's going to be, you know, crammed down into a short action. So that's what the hand load manuals are going to say or think that you're loading. But anyone who has had a custom 284 for hunting knows you can get a lot out of it. It's a big overperformer. So I just found that interesting that when you look at all the cartridges preferred by competitive shooters and all the cartridges preferred by hunters, that 284 is a great balance. I'm not saying the 284 is available and popular and common like some of the other ones, but it's pretty cool for those in the know that it can be a phenomenal hunting round. It's also a phenomenal competitive round. It's almost like the most balanced cartridge of all. I know I say things like this a lot, like this cartridge is the best overall, this cartridge is this, but if you think about it, of all the cartridges, it's the one that I think would balance out hunting and competitive shooting the best in our modern day. If only it was available in chambered like it should be. So I really wish someone like Savage would just bring out the 284 Winchester in a long action in their Model 110. That would be so awesome. But anyway, can you guys think of a cartridge that really balances both? You know, another one that comes to mind would be like a 6mm Creedmoor, not the 6.5, the 6mm Creedmoor. If you're hunting coyotes and antelope and things like that, it would be a great balance between competitive shooting and hunting as well. Just, you're not going to get as big of a game with that 6mm Creedmoor. Anyway, can you guys think of any? An obvious one you might be thinking of is like the 308. It's done both for a long time. In all honesty, there are several, but I just thought, man, that 284, it's pretty cool. So, guys, I'll just stop here today. Check the description. I've got a few links in there, including my website, Patreon. I don't expect you to support me, but if you want to support the channel, it is there. Got a link to my Instagram and my Twitter. I'm getting very, very close to 1,000 subscribers. I'm excited about it. Worked really hard for it, so I'm looking forward to that. Hope you have a wonderful day, and until next time, take care.